Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming late on a Friday. We appreciate you being here and joining us for this workshop. Let's begin. Of course. We were doing so well. Oh, hey, okay.
There we are. Cool.
We'll quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Beth Goldberg. I head research at a group called Jigsaw. We're in a semi-autonomous unit within Google.
Yeah, hello, my name is Stefan Voss. I work for the German news agency Deutsche Presseagentur as a head of verification.
And I'm Isabelle Sonnenfeld. I'm the head of EMEA for Google News Lab. And we work with journalists in newsrooms to fight misinformation, to drive innovation in journalism, and advance diversity, inclusion, and equity in media. And this is by accident that we both have the same jacket. So it was not planned.
This is the uniform for fighting misinformation. You'll fight it better in this outfit, I guess. Okay, I'm going to start with a quick example of fighting misinformation from Germany. So the screenshot you see here is of a video that went viral last May. Now, this video is of a burning house in southern Germany, and the text here on the bottom blames Ukrainian immigrants, refugees, for setting this house on fire. Videos like this sparked real-world violence, and there were a number of arson attacks on refugee centers in Germany. Now, what fact checkers found a few days later was that this video was actually 10 years old. It was a video of just a normal house fire, but someone had repurposed it, put a fake logo on it from a news organization, and put this fake text on the bottom, and blamed refugees. So what we can take away from that example is that debunking or fact-checking is critical to correct misinformation, but it's insufficient on its own. It's often overcome by the speed and virality of misinformation. I know folks like Stefan's team at the DPA deal with these challenges of the speed and virality of misinformation all the time. I'll give you two quick examples here. The typical time that the Facebook fact-check organizations take to review and remove misinformation is about 3 days or 72 hours. By that point, most of the impressions on a given piece of misinformation have already happened. Similarly, we know that misinformation goes viral much faster than real news. Just one stat here, these falsehoods on Twitter in particular get retweeted 70% more often than accurate news. So debunking and other sort of post hoc interventions are very important, but I want to talk about the other side of this timeline here from being exposed to misinformation. What if we think more about this opportunity to invest in preempting misinformation? Now, all of you have already thought about this, and that's why you're in this room. So we're going to talk today about pre-bunking, which is just one technique, and it's not a silver bullet, but it is one very promising technique to help your audiences both recognize and then resist misinformation. The reason pre-bunking works is because misinformation has this Achilles heel. It's predictable. The best misinformation reuses very familiar tactics and tropes, and this enables us, as journalists, as fact-checkers, to spot these patterns and preempt them. Slight warning, the next slide has a somewhat graphic image of misinformation that went viral a few years ago. So this is an image from the EU migrant crisis. This was a Polish media cover that was really just demonizing refugees that were coming to Europe in 2016. And so if we study lessons like this, we can say, okay, what were the common narratives of misinformation about migrants the last time there was a wave of migration to Europe? Last year, my team said, okay, with the start of the war in Ukraine, we know that there is going to be anti-migrant misinformation once again. What can we anticipate and pre-bunk? So this example we started with, that was blaming Ukrainian refugees for setting houses on fire, used similar narratives to the same misinformation 6 years earlier, right? Both of these, slightly different examples, but they're both using this common narrative that refugees are dangerous, or that refugees are criminals. So we can anticipate this and design interventions like pre-bunking to get ahead of this. And we're going to show you an example in a few minutes. Let me first now go back to the science of pre-bunking. I showed you when it's effective, but let's talk about how it actually works. This is a common communications technique, and it comes from the 1960s when there were these researchers who said, how could we create mental armor or mental antibodies in the same way that we have vaccines for our physical bodies? And so the way it works is it forewarns people and it equips them when they encounter misinformation in the future. It's been tested across a number of subjects, so it's agnostic of content. You can apply it to things like public health, to terrorist messaging. It's been used quite a bit in the environmental studies field. And so often it's been applied in almost PSA, public service announcement type formats. All pre-bunking has this three-part formula, the handy formula that's on your spreadsheet, your worksheet that you all received, which we're going to go into in quite a bit of depth later. I'll just note right now, there is first an emotional warning. You might be manipulated by media or by some sort of attack. You should be on guard. And then there's a microdose or an example, much like the way a vaccine contains a microdose of the virus. And then there's the refutation, the counter arguments, so that you know why that propaganda is wrong. We're going to go into all of this in much more depth, but I just wanted to share with you all sort of what is the formula for why a pre-bunking message is effective and a little bit different from some other misinformation fighting techniques. It can come in a number of formats. Now, the format we're going to show you and focus on today are short videos. This is what Google and Jigsaw have invested in the last 3 or 4 years. But there's also examples of pre-bunking in text formats. So Twitter actually deployed pre-bunking messages in the 2020 US elections. And they said, you are likely to see misleading narratives about how to vote by mail. You can also find pre-bunking in games. So there's a fantastic game you all should check out called the Bad News Game, put out by partners of ours at Cambridge University. And this game actually puts you in the role of the spreader of disinformation. So all of these are successful and effective formats, and I'm sure many of you could innovate on other formats. Could we do this in podcasts? Could we be doing this in images, etc.? I'll turn it over now to Stefan to speak for a minute on why we think pre-bunking can be effectively used by journalists.
Thanks. Beth, before I start, yes, as mentioned, we at the Deutsche Presseagentur DPA have quite a huge fact-checking team at about 30 colleagues doing fact-checks in German, Dutch, and French language. But with us here in this beautiful room are also fact-checkers from different European fact-checking organizations, but maybe even global. I would like to ask my colleagues and friends to raise their hand who has ever published a fact-check. Oh, that's cool. So wonderful, great, from Canada as well, and lead stories from the US, that's great. So whenever you also have questions to them from Belgium over there, from Croatia, so please get in contact with our colleagues. But let me just, before I come to the point, one thing, when we had we do usually a recap. We do a recap in the Brufani bar, and maybe if you join them in the evening, you know, those intensive talks. And I was asked, and this is because of my inaccurate pronunciation, I've said debanking in a way like that, and somebody asked me, debanking, what's that? Is something with bank accounts to do, or with fact-checking being paid in advance or something like that? And I thought, that's a great idea, but this is totally different. Now let's talk about debunking and pre-bunking in this particular case. Pre-bunking is first, as we have mentioned, and maybe some of you have been in the session that was before here with Mary Fitzgerald talking about there's a freedom of speech, but not a freedom of reach. And in this is also the question of speed. So as you have pointed it out, false claims are often viral and are spread very fast with toxic algorithms also on the platforms. So here's the needs for fact-checking organizations to be faster, to react faster on that. On being prepared on certain issues like let's say predictable ones, elections, ballot voting, stuff around it, but also other things. The Russian war in Ukraine, we have seen that migrants coming over to countries, energy supplies in winter, but also the horrible earthquake in Turkey or Syria already. It is possible in a way from the experience of fact-checking organizations to, and we'll talk about this a little later, to recognize patterns in that, to be prepared for certain, let's say, disinformation narratives, although this capacity is limited. Recognizing patterns, as I've said, is partly possible, very important for fact-checking organizations, and I assume my colleagues have a lot of also to say on that, is formats. What we see, and that's also part of research, that really successful disinformation, which is widely spread and amplified, is often very, very, let's say, emotional, very colorful, but not in a positive way. Just maybe that's a meme, or it's a two-sentence phrase, a short video, and it's really up to date. And the fact checks are often, let's say, gray. I would not say boring, of course, because we write them, but it's like more like doing research work, very accurate to debunk a claim and putting some proof on that. So we have to innovate also on the formats itself. To have, it is of course impossible to respond to that one-on-one, because we have to prove, and the counter speech has to be made thoroughly. But as said, we have to make our formats more attractive to these ones. And the last one is very important for us as a news agency. It's written down: discrediting content, not actors. This means that we can do this pre-bunking work only partly because we are not, let's say, we're not doing any surveillance of certain parts of society. We are not in like already analyzing some and say, this will come from them as well. This can't be fact-checkers' work. I mean, of course, there are fact-checkers who are doing the meta level of working on who's behind narratives and where do they come from all over Europe and stuff like that. But as said, this is also in a way limited. This is not the work of objective fact-checking organizations. This, in brief, what we do about this at the moment.
Thanks a lot, Stefan, and thanks, Beth, for giving us a framework, a theoretical framework, and also showing us the big picture of what pre-bunking is and how it's connected to debunking. And you already mentioned it, that in the past year, Jigsaw and Google had worked on an experiment, one of the first pre-bunking campaigns, and I will talk a little bit more about the practical case. As Beth pointed out, last year when Russia invaded Ukraine, we were foreseeing that there were misinformation campaigns happening and specifically targeting the migration topic. And so we were able to detect that, and we focused on basically two narratives and based on research, based on interviews with experts from the civil society, fact-checkers, media organization, government officials. We looked at the economic narrative, so Ukrainians taking away daily supplies was the narrative. And the technique, as it's been called by experts, is scapegoating. The second narrative was around the security aspect. And the tactic there was fear-mongering, and how that will look like, or looked like, in the campaign that we launched in Central Eastern Europe. We will see in a short video. This is just 60 seconds. 60 seconds, yes.
Válka neprobíhá pouze na Ukrajině. Ovlivňuje nás všechny i skrze naše mobilní telefony. Pro výhru jsou totiž někteří ochotní udělat cokoliv. Například v nás vyvolávat strach tím, že všechny ukrajinské uprchlíky označí za nebezpečné.
Haló, jsi tady?
Jsem, ale asi půjdu. Už bude tma a já si teď večer sama venku nepřipadám úplně bezpečně, co jsou tu ty uprchlíci.
Počkej, to myslíš vážně?
Teď čtu na internetu, že připadávají lidi přímo na ulici. Teď jsou nebezpeční.
Většina uprchlíků jsou jenom ženy a malí děti. Jde jenom o snahu vyvolat v nás strach.
Proč by lhali?
Některý lidi nás chtějí proti Ukrajincům poštvat. Je jednodušší ovlivnit lidi, kteří se něčeho bojí a odvést pozornost od skutečného důvodu, proč tady uprchlíci jsou. A to je válka.
Pokud v nás někdo vyvolává strach, může se pokoušet ovlivnit naše emoce a zmanipulovat nás. Metoda vyvolávání strachu je jednou z nejběžnějších taktik pro šíření dezinformací. Nenechte se sebou manipulovat.
So we developed a series of 6 videos. Every video was 60 seconds long about emerging disinformation narratives and also obviously talking about the tactics behind the disinformation campaigns. To reach a wide audience, we showed the videos as ads on 4 social media platforms, so YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. Meaning that this process can be developed also by anyone using ads on social media platforms. And also it enabled us to measure the success of the campaign with obviously special ads tools. And we focus on 2 ways to measure the success of the campaign. First, reach, meaning how many people did we reach with the videos, so impressions and views. And second, discernment of misinformation, of the misinformation technique. What does that mean? Did we change the behavior and the view on the disinformation narrative after people watched the video? And so how did we do that? We included pop-up quizzes after the video, 1 question, in order to get a quick sense of how people reacted to the video. And how did we do? Was the campaign successful? Were the campaigns successful? Using ads allowed us to reach over 50% of the online audience. And this means that we ultimately reached almost 1/3 of the Polish, the Czech and the Slovak population in the course of 2 months where we were running the campaign. And obviously this is a strong sign that social media, and especially ads on social media, are an effective tool to scale pre-bunking campaigns to a wide range of, or to a large population. And especially quickly, and we talked about speed, so it's important that we reach a population very fast to pre-bunk disinformation. So the question in the room, obviously, is probably, did we reach, or what do we learn from the campaign? And so did people really learn anything after they have seen the videos and became more resilient to disinformation? And I think the answer is some did and some didn't, but more people were able to identify techniques after seeing the pre-bunking videos. And for some videos, we even saw an 8%, or saw up to 8% of viewers were more resistant to misinformation and disinformation online after seeing the 60-second video. For others, the campaign had no effect. But on average, there was a 2 to 3% improvement of pre-bunked videos in comparison to compared to a control group. So while these numbers seem to be small, we have to take into account that we're talking about 90 million people. So looking at the 3 countries where we were running the campaign. And obviously we're taking this experiment and the approach to pre-bunk in order to learn from it. And while we are analyzing the learnings from the campaign in Central and Eastern Europe, we're already working on a campaign that we will run in Germany later this spring, where we already talk to experts, similar to the campaign that we were running in Central and Eastern Europe, so experts from the academics, fact-checkers, media organizations, non-profits, think tanks, in order to understand what are the narratives that are relevant in order to run a pre-bunking campaign. And we also obviously learn from the campaign in order to figure out what are the techniques that we have to integrate in the campaign that we will run in Germany. More work to be done here, but also more to come from our end when we will launch the campaign in Germany. And I think now I hand it over back to Beth for some interactive play.
And I'll first say Stefan and his team at the DPA are some of those experts who we interviewed about what we should pre-bunk in Germany. And I'll just underscore the point that Google and Jigsaw are not deciding ourselves what to pre-bunk in each place. We really are going into markets and asking the experts, and we'd ultimately like to be in a world where the experts, the fact checkers and the journalists and the misinformation scholars are the ones deciding and designing and running these campaigns themselves. I don't know if you want to add anything on that, Stefan?
Yeah, I would definitely. And I will come to you in a minute. Thank you. The point is here, of course, some things might be predictable, and it is not a surprise when winter is coming and the discussion is about Russian energy supply and stuff like that, how this could be misused. But to be also honest, and you are aware of it, and we are definitely aware of it, and that we have raised in our discussions definitely that successful misinformation also has an irrational aspect of that. This is, in a way, people want to be entertained, new things, and a lot of things could not have been predicted. So it would be a huge mistake to think pre-bunking might have a role, but for myself it plays a role, but we'll see how important it will become. Because as said, a lot of really widely amplified disinformation were in a way crazy, maybe invented by lunatics or cynic people putting 5G and, I don't know, vaccinations together and stuff like that. You can't always predict that. So just to understand this and put this into a context on here, this is just the beginning on that. But yeah, maybe some more on that later.
I noticed something that, well, at least in my head, it's interesting. Like in the video, you used pictures of what could, like it basically looks like a Facebook post, or it looks like a WhatsApp message. And in the beginning, you were saying how much time it takes for fact checkers that work with Facebook or Meta, like Factograph does, to how much time it takes to kind of do a fact check. So it kind of stands out to me that the examples that were used in the video or in this presentation, at least for me, aren't so related to Google. So I would say that misinformation or disinformation that people see because they use Google or because of Google would be, for example, much more related to ads or websites that usually pose as media that basically make money out of creating disinformation and people clicking on ads. So I was just wondering, is there maybe like a plan or an idea for future pre-bunking videos or initiatives that you are going to create to maybe sort of try to connect the content you're presenting to stuff that is maybe more related to Google, such as YouTube videos or anything like that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Feel free to chime in as well, but this campaign and all of the many campaigns we've done for pre-bunking have all started on YouTube. And so, yes, totally agree with you. This is a problem on Google surfaces as well, and we are addressing it there. In fact, we piloted this first on YouTube, and I'm happy to share some of those results beyond the Central Europe campaign. To your point about the video looking like it was framing Facebook, not our intention. In fact, most of the examples were headlines to make it look like they're from fake news websites. So we weren't trying to actually abstract. Our lawyers made us abstract it away from looking like any particular platform. So that was not our intention. Wow, lots of questions. Okay, maybe we take a few at the same time because I want to make sure we have a full 20 minutes for the workshop portion. So could we start here and then go around?
Alan Duke with Lead Stories, fact checker. I got to fact check you. You said fact checkers take an average of 72 hours to remove content. We don't remove content. The platforms do. And I think it's a very important distinction because we get blamed for removing content. We add content. On Meta, we don't remove anything. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Hi, this is Carlos. I'm a fact checker. I do public policy for Maldita.es. It's a Spanish fact checker, and I also do public policy for the European Association of Fact-Checking Organizations called EFCSN. My question is about the specifics of these projects, and I will explain myself. I would love to know what kind of timeframes have been used for the experiments, particularly on these very more content-specific interventions in YouTube happening in Poland. And I was so glad to see some of our partner organizations there providing cues into what kind of narratives are moving. I am interested in what kind of time these campaigns have been running, because there is solid research already done in things that are very much repeated, like public service announcements or risk announcements regarding medicine or whatever, that once you see it a couple of times, just completely lose attention on, and the effectivity is down dramatically. So I would be very interested in knowing for how long these campaigns lasted, and if you had any idea on how often do you need to produce new content in order to keep, the expected impact there. Thank you.
Wonderful question. Thanks, Carlos. Yes, so the campaigns, I don't have the exact dates top of mind. That whole campaign in Central Europe has been published about on the Jigsaw Medium page, so that will have the exact dates, but it ran for about 2 months. For YouTube, at least, we were able to say, do not show the same video to the same user a second time. So a user may have seen both videos in their language, and they may have seen it again on a different platform. So say they were on both YouTube and Facebook, they may have seen it twice. We can't stop that. But we tried not to get that banner blindness that you're talking about of, tuning it out. In terms of how long do the effects last, we have a brand new paper out with some of our partners at Cambridge University. It is just up as a preprint, so it's a working paper under peer review, but the long and short of it, so you don't have to read the whole 40-page paper, is about 10 to 30 days the effects last from one of these videos. So maybe it's not so bad if people did see them again a second time. All right, I think we had one more question, and then we're going to move to the workshop. 2 more questions. Okay.
Hi, hello. My name is Camilla. I'm a researcher at the University of Amsterdam where we research misinformation. My question is the one about your audience. So I think this is not a secret that a large part of the social media users who consume and share this information, they often have a problematic relationship with the truth to begin with. So we know that they're more prone to believe what we call alternative facts. So who do you then think is the audience for the pre-bunking? And the second question is the one about the reach. Have you thought about sharing these videos that you've shown us with problematic groups on social media that tend to spread such content and measure the reach there?
Great question and great suggestion to look at that. As I said before, any campaign that we are running based on partner interviews, experts, and research is an iteration of the past campaign, so I think it's definitely something to look at.
One study we did do in the United States with some of our first pre-bunking videos, we did focus groups with sort of mainstream internet users, and then with people who spent time on a lot of fringe news sites. And for that group, we'll call them fringe users for now, we showed them pre-bunking videos as well as other media literacy interventions and wanted their reactions on what seemed credible or not. The pre-bunking videos were okay. They were less excited about the specific narrative-based pre-bunking like you saw here today about refugees, and they were much more comfortable with what's called technique-based pre-bunking, which is subject agnostic, and it's just teaching you about, say, fear-mongering or scapegoating, but without the specific context of refugees. So it could teach you about scapegoating with an example from a cartoon and keep it very apolitical. So that worked well with those fringe users.
Hi, my name's Eleanor. I work for Reuters. You guys are obviously doing lots of good things here, but do you not worry that Google itself, with the Google search engine, Google autocorrect, technically is playing a part in spreading disinformation, fake news, because the algorithm itself, popularity is one of the factors that is in the algorithm. And I remember from last summer, there was a massacre, Srebrenica, I'm mispronouncing the name. Srebrenica is a lie was an incredibly popular search. And do you not worry that Google is playing a part in spreading disinformation potentially? And how do you deal with that in terms of what you're doing versus the search engine?
I can answer on that, not being with Google. I share that concern, definitely I do that. And as said, that these pre-bunking campaigns can only a small part, at least from my perspective in that. There are bigger issues here from our things, and that is fighting disinformation, enabling journalists to provide counter-speech, to do fact-checking. So definitely when we hear, and I would even say being on the panel here to say, all big platforms can and should do a lot more on that. Definitely, we talked about YouTube. YouTube, from our perspective, has still, maybe they have improved, might be, I can't control it, but there's a lot to do on that. And just to add this one, and I had talks in before with colleagues, and they were saying maybe these activities like pre-banking is something, maybe like a fig leaf to distract from other obligations. And I would say, let's see, let's wait from that. This is definitely not sufficient, but there's, at least in Europe, one aspect we have here, which is regulation, which is the DSA in the Code of Practice, and we are at least optimistic that things will see, and we'll have to look afterwards, but definitely, at least from the journalist perspective, pre-bunking is a small part of the process.
Great question. Maybe I can just add to that. So I think there are various ways we fight disinformation and tackle misinformation. On the one hand, obviously, it's through products and changes to our products and advancing the products to detect misinformation and disinformation on our platforms. The other aspect is working with experts, both on the research field and fact-checkers like Stefan and others. We have partnerships over the past years, developed partnerships over the past years globally with media organizations, with fact-checking organizations, in order to collaboratively work against the spread of misinformation online. That is, again, not saying that we solved the problem. I think we take that responsibility very seriously, and we try to iterate on how we tackle misinformation over and over again. There are also ways to support fact-checkers on the ground in the various regions. So we just launched the Global Fact Check Fund together with Pointer and the IFCN, in order to support fact-checkers to do their work that they are used to do, and also to give them more tools and training. So what we have done, for example, with DPA in Germany and also in other countries, is putting up training programs for journalists to get access to trainings and tools and techniques in order to fact-check, but also verify content. And so the one way is on our platforms, through our products, through our policies, and always learning from feedback that we get, obviously. So I think your questions were well pointed. And on the other hand, supporting programs that provide training efforts and training opportunities.
One sentence. Google funds Jigsaw because they share that concern. We're a nonprofit. We fight misinformation and other online harms to do exactly what you're describing. All right, we're gonna not have enough time for the workshop, so we're diving in. I'm gonna run through some basics here of lingo, and then we're going to start to fill out the worksheet that hopefully you all have. If you don't have it, my colleague Vincent in the audience can help you fill it out. So I'm going to use the term claim here to talk about specific facts, specific assertions. So fact checks, for example, are debunking these specific claims. If we zoom out one level from a claim and have a collection of claims, you can think of it as a narrative, a series of events or a series of claims that have a particular point of view or story. And then there are manipulation techniques. You heard us mention this a few times already. So things like fear-mongering or scapegoating. These are also sometimes called informal fallacies or logical fallacies. This is the how. It's not the what. It's really how someone is being persuaded, or it's a means of influence. And I'm going to give you a few examples that will make this seem less academic. So here's one of my favorite examples. This is a true story from the United States about 2 years ago now. There was a nurse who went in front of Congress, and she claimed that she had become magnetic because she got vaccinated. And so she's sticking her house key on her chest. Incredible. Okay, so the narrative that this is a part of, this claim that she became magnetic, is part of an overarching narrative that we heard a lot, that the vaccines caused injury. The vaccine was dangerous, right? And if we zoom out one layer further, the technique at play here is fear-mongering. And we've actually got a video that I won't take the time to show you here about fear-mongering, but it's trying to make you afraid so that you don't get the vaccine, right? So pre-bunking doesn't work at the level of the claim, where the fact-checking works best, but it really can work either at the level of the narrative or the technique. So here's the part where you all get to think about what you want to pre-bunk. Think about the audience that you typically communicate with or that you would like to pre-bunk from some misinformation. And think about one misleading claim that you have seen recently, whether it's been in your news feed or whether it was something that you heard over the dinner table at a family gathering. You can also use one of these sample claims here, or the nurse being magnetic. It's amazing. Go ahead and write that down and then maybe have a quick conversation with someone next to you. There's some amazing claims in this room, I'm sure. So I'll give you 3 minutes for this. Okay, I see a few of you looking up, so we're going to keep moving here. The next step is you're going to zoom out from that specific claim to the narrative. What is the larger story that that claim is a part of? Now you can remember the vaccine made this woman magnetic to vaccines are dangerous. So what is sort of the larger narrative around your claim? Go ahead and write that down.
If you're lacking imagination, you might think about your private WhatsApp group you have with your family members, for example. And some of you might also have the experience of, now I don't want to say, I want to once again talk about the crazy uncle, but yeah, I think some of you might know what I'm talking about. With family, relatives, and out of nothing, you are, whatever, confronted with strange theories and convictions.
All right, I think we're ready to zoom out one more time and go to techniques. So on that third line, think about what is the technique being used here to manipulate the audience? Is it evoking fear or anger? Is it taking something out of context? It's called decontextualization. Is it simplifying something down to only two choices, like a false dichotomy? Here are just a few examples of these techniques, and it very well could be that multiple techniques are being used. All right, those gears are still turning for some, but so that we get to the end, I'm going to move ahead. I'm going to skip some of these tips, and we're going to now get to the writing portion. So this is where you get to get creative. You now have to craft a warning. Now this is the opening of your pre-bunking message. You want to give your audience a heads up that they're likely to encounter this type of content online, and write a sentence or two. The example here, be alert about election information. You're likely to see content trying to manipulate you. You don't have to be specific about who is trying to manipulate them. You just have to talk about what it is.
Ah, this is the school part of it, I see. Yeah, okay.
There's going to be an award for the best pre-bunking message. You'll get to share them. No, there's no award, but you will get to share them. Okay, the warning doesn't need to be elaborate, so we'll keep moving. Now think about that claim or that narrative you wrote up at the top. Can you describe that as an example? Is that a meme? Is it a video clip? Is it an article? Describe what that microdose looks like that you might show to your audience.
Dear guys, weekend is very close.
There are drinks for all of you after this. Thank you for doing this. If you don't finish the homework assignment now, you can turn it in to us over drinks. No. We're going to move to the very last part. This is actually the hardest part, and it is the meat of the pre-bunking message. It's the refutation. So this is not fact-checking. You can refute specific facts, but it's best if you avoid sort of true-false language. Instead, you want to explain why they're being misled, right? If you remember the video you saw, they say, emotional language is often used to mislead you. They were fear-mongering so that they could manipulate you. So you want to explain to your audience why they're being manipulated by this information. Does that make sense? So think about a few counter-arguments. The other example here from the video was the man saying, there's no way that the refugees are that dangerous. Most of them are women and children, right? So if there are examples like that that you can offer to refute the misinformation that you've been writing about. Think of one or two and go ahead and write that down as a refutation.
So just from not native speakers, as refutation is understood as delivering counter-arguments now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, in honor of time and getting you out of here to drinks soon, we're going to put our pens down. But first, do we have a brave volunteer or two who would be willing to read, wow, thank you, be willing to read their pre-bunking message? Could we get a microphone up in the front, please? I'm very excited about this. There's no right or wrong answer on this quiz. Everyone can pre-bunk their own community's best. I think it was the front corner here.
The claim: the Ukrainian government are all Nazis and drug dealers. The narrative: Russia is defending and justifying its invasion of Ukraine, trying to defend Ukrainians from their government, protect Ukrainians from their government. And I'm not sure about the manipulation technique, because it could have been a number of those combined.
It could be scapegoating.
Scapegoating is the closest,
or distraction also, like this, like they're deflecting attention. Yeah.
That's a good one. I like the one, especially we see it every day almost. It's just over and over, just repeating these different kinds of claims we see on that, and the idea behind it, analyzing that. A lot of people I can tell who live in Berlin, and in many talks with Germans, that they fell on these, they can be manipulated with this stuff of false claims and how it is made.
So I guess this one's easy, the warning: you'll hear content about the Ukrainian government being Nazis and drug dealers. The microdose would be a clip from Kremlin television, Russian state television. And the narrative would be that it seeks to justify the Russian invasion of Ukraine and turn your country against supporting Ukraine. And in the last presidential election in Ukraine, the far-right candidate got 0.6%, while Zelensky, a Jewish candidate, got 75%.
That's phenomenal. Will you all join me in a round of applause for our brave volunteer? Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I will end by thanking all of you for joining us for this workshop. I hope this was informative, and please contact us or come up and ask us questions if you would like to continue the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and I would like to ask the fact checkers just to come to me to talk a little bit with them. The fact checkers, if they can spare a minute or two. Thank you very much.
Thank you.